Welcome to Contemporary Black Voices, where we take on the most important issues confronting Black America. Today, we will delve into the problem of disparity and how different economic and racial groups are treated in this country by taking a close look at the two crises that happen at the same time, and that is the one in the Silicon Valley bank collapse and the powerful tornado that struck the city of Rolling Fork, Mississippi. Disparity is defined as a lack of equality or similarity, often used to describe things that are not fair, particularly when it comes to social and economic issues. In our discussion today, we will concentrate on the economic disparities that will lead to the difference in the government's and the business world's response to these two crises. Joining me this morning are two of our regular contributors to the Contemporary Black Voices, New York Times bestselling author Caleb Alexander, and businessman and community leader Chris Dawkins. We are missing from the show today, and someone who will be missed, Dr. Sharon Michael Chadwell, but the doctor will be with us next week. Our special guest for our show today is a former three-time elected legislator to the Texas House of Representatives, Mr. Lane Denton. While a member of the legislature, Mr. Denton was a leader of the famous Dirty 30, a name given to 30 legislators who fought and won against the corruption running rapid in the Texas House of Representatives. Mr. Denton has been involved in both state and national politics. Over the years, he has amassed a vast knowledge of how the system works and how it should work. And for those reasons, he is the ideal person to assist us this morning in our discussion on the disparities in the treatment of different economic groups in this country, the rich up in California, and the poor folks that got slaughtered by the tornado in Mississippi. So Lane, welcome to Contemporary Black Voices.
Thank you very much, Fred. It's my pleasure to be here, and particularly with some distinguished panel members. This is an issue that has been going on actually for a long time, almost from the very beginning of the founding of our country. But there has to come a time, and maybe 2023, 2024, it's time to say enough is enough. And I'm believing in the theory that fairness has to prevail. And if we don't do something now, it's never going to happen. It's just going to get worse. And I'm raising the issue, although it is a difficult issue, between how the folks in California and Mississippi, the disparities occurred. And I think we're now looking at rich versus poor, the donor class versus those who don't contribute. And how can you justify not helping everybody out? If you lived in the Silicon Valley and you had 90% of their depositors, they all were made whole.
You're right.
They did not lose a dollar. And it is true that there was a combination of the big banks who wanted to come in and help the rich folks in California, and the FDIC and the Federal Reserve to make sure that every payment. But it wasn't that the people in California didn't know the law. The law was $250,000 or less.
FDIC.
In the FDIC. Well, then that's opened up from no banks will now lose. If a bank in Arkansas or South Carolina or Oregon, they're going to have to pay everybody. And it was mismanagement that caused the problem. Now,
who's going to help the people in Rolling Fork?
Well, it wasn't their fault. You see, what happened, it was the bank's fault in California, but global warming and the climate change issue is causing the horrible storms that we're having. Then I think the government's got to come in. And I think every single person that lost their home in Rolling Fork should get a new house. And you do that by the combination of enormous resources of the federal, state, and local government, and make people whole. They deserve it as much as the folks in California. One of the folks that had money in the bank in California had just gotten a mortgage, $9 million mortgage.
Oh, gee. Wow.
So did he keep his house? Yes. And I'll go back. Let's talk about 2008. People lost their homes because the banks did all kinds of crazy deals. Well, the banks should have been reorganized completely so that people wouldn't lose their house.
And the banks did not make them whole.
No, they did not.
Not at
They
all.
lost their house.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question though. You first of all, thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to be able to talk with you. But you've given us a lot of information in the short period of time to unpack. When you talk about Silicon Valley and what happened to Silicon Valley Bank and what the government did and the other banks have done is unprecedented, okay? It's never happened before. The FDIC always said each insurer, and everybody in the country should know this, has $250,000 guaranteed. If you put anything in any more than that in there, you may lose that. However, I'm going to stop there and switch to these people Fred's talking about in Mississippi. That was an act of God, okay? And whether they had insurance or didn't have insurance, I think is a question, okay? And if they didn't have insurance, how much is the government responsible for that? Now, we know it's a whole community, and if that community is wiped out, they will no longer be there. But I'm just wondering, especially for the viewers, to look at this and ask the question, why should we as a government bail these people out?
Well, I think because it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
And if we can't start helping our people in a very comprehensive, massive way, you know, we're funding the Social Security program in Ukraine. That will come as a shock to most Americans that we're doing that.
The Social Security program?
Yes, their retirement fund is being funded by the United States.
And we give Israel about $4 billion a year, no questions asked.
That's correct. They have a guarantee over the next 10 years. Now they're in quite several years. It was $35 billion. We're not discussing the situation in Israel today, but it points out that we don't mind as a government of giving money to people all over the world. And it's another major discussion that we've got to talk about is everybody's going to say, well, that's great and everything, but it'll never happen. And the problem, of course, is the United States Congress. Ralph Nader is a very good friend of mine. He came down in 1976, endorsed me for the State Railroad Commission, and you would have thought the end of the world happened, that Ralph Nader was endorsing me, and that's all the press wanted to talk about. Well, he says, his theory, we've got to go to every congressional district. We've got to start with one or two people in every congressional district and build from there. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because it's not going to happen. President Biden goes to Mississippi and he says, we're going to do everything we can to help you. We're going to be here as long as it takes. Well, the question is, what's the next step? Because when he leaves, yesterday when he left, he won't be coming back to Roland Park, right?
No, and also the money is going to go to the state and not to the folks
Oh,
that
now
need
that's
it.
going to be a problem.
It's going to the state.
That's going to be a problem.
So the football player
Mississippi.
may get some more of that. What's his name?
Brett Favre.
Might get some of that money to build something else. So it's going to go through the state.
Yeah.
You have a governor who don't give a damn about those people in Rolling Fork. We know that.
Right.
And so
But he showed up at the
Well,
press
he
conference.
would, yeah, a good
course.
photo op, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he's gone.
Right.
I mean, a perfect example is right up the street from Rolling Fork is Jackson, Mississippi, and they haven't done anything about those folks' water in a long time. Well, this governor, he's right wing, racist. So why would they send and the legislature up there? That's Trump territory. So why would anyone think that they haven't done anything for those people for years? All of a sudden, they're going to give all this money to those folks to rebuild their houses. I don't see it.
And as you're saying, they're not giving it directly to them.
No.
They're sending it to the state.
To the state.
So they still may never get that money.
They never get that. Well, yeah.
Well, 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah, never came.
A lot of times the states do have their own insurance companies that assist. So the money, the people who don't have private insurance, they're going to be made whole by FEMA and by state agencies.
What do you mean made whole? How do you define made whole? Is FEMA going to go in there and build their homes again?
No, but FEMA is going to cover them. The same way that their private insurance company would cover them, FEMA will cover them. And so I want to rewind a little bit. Okay, so just to go back.
But you said I'm winding too fast?
No, well, I want to rewind a little bit and just talk a little bit about the bank failures and what's going on, which we just touched on a little bit about the tornado situation. But as far as the Silicon Valley Bank situation goes, a couple of things. One, that bank. Let's start like this. So we just came out of a pandemic. The government's broke, so they spent trillions and trillions of dollars to combat this pandemic, and at the same time, they infused trillions of dollars into the economy, which of course caused there were severe inflationary results because of that. So right now we are in a deflationary mode, is what the feds are in. They're trying to squeeze money out of the economy, and so the idea that the Fed is going to turn around and inject a few $1 billion back into the economy to save this bank is not going to happen because they're trying to control inflation. And so that's one of the reasons why there was not a direct intervention of federal dollars into those banks. So what they did was they facilitated the 16 largest banks in the country to deposit into Silicon Valley Bank. So that's what happened. So Silicon Valley Bank was very, very conservative. It's a bank that primarily serves the Silicon Valley area, very affluent area. And part of that was they considered to have a Silicon Valley credit card and all that kind of stuff. Or I'm from Silicon Valley, I have a Silicon Valley bank card and this and this. It was a kind of prestigious. And so, but the bank itself was very, very conservative. And so what they did was they invested, they're pretty much, most of their investments were in long-term securities, which are very, 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 very secure. And so just to make the numbers, I'm just going to make the numbers easy. Let's say these securities you're earning 5% on, okay? And so what happened is when the feds raised the interest rate, again, we're trying to squeeze money out of the economy. Mm-hmm. So again, they raised the interest rates. So when you raise the interest rates, the bonds that are at 5% interest, they're no longer valuable anymore.
Right.
Right. So people want to go and get the new bonds that are 6%, right? Mm. So the bonds that these people had, these long-term bonds that they had invested in, they were devalued. And so that's what kind of caused a run on the bank because the bank's valuation and everything else, it dropped. And so people kind of, it was, part of that was that these people were very tech savvy. And so these people are all on their iPhones and they're texting, hey, the bank's value dropped, the bank's value dropped, so it caused a run on the bank. Mm-hmm. So what the feds had to do is to stop the run, which they did. They stopped the run, and they kind of solved the problem by having these banks deposit funds into Silicon Valley Bank, which made the people say, okay, our money's safe. The bank is solvent. We're good to go. The other thing they did, I think it was USB or whatever it was that failed. So they just cleared the path and said, go ahead, they told another bank, you can buy them. And so there was they cleared a lot of the regulatory stuff. And so they allowed another bank to just buy the other bank. So that's pretty much what they did. The banking industry was told, you're on your own. You're going to have to fix it yourself.
Who was?
The banking industry.
Okay.
And so that's what they did. They took it among themselves. It was facilitated by the feds, but they solved the problem with this deposit.
Wait a minute. I have an account with Bank of America. Okay, I'm just
I
creating
know where
this.
you're going. Some of your money is in Silicon Valley Bank.
What? Really?
So I mean, it was just it's electronic. It's all electronic. So they just move money from here to there electronically. But to answer your question, I know where you're going. Yes, there's a chance that somebody, but you can still go to Bank of America and get your money out. You know what I mean? So Bank of America is solvent. But a lot of the deposits, all these banks came together and they did a deposit in the Silicon Valley Bank just to keep them solvent.
Okay.
Well,
That's what happened.
for clarification, though, banks really don't have any money at all, do they? I mean, for every dollar that they have, they can lend out that 10 or 100 times. So when you go for your money, like these people, no. Okay.
There's a lot.
lot,
They have to maintain a certain percentage.
To cover you. To cover you.
There's a certain percentage they have to maintain.
And
So is it different for different banks?
No, it's standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's across the board. It's law.
If you are giving loans out, you have to have, even though loans go bad, you have to have enough in the bank to cover if I want to come in and get my money out. Is that right? Okay.
Well, I think another issue that you could make that the people in Silicon Valley, and I guess you could excuse the fact that they didn't know the law because they were all dropouts, weren't they, in school?
Yeah, sure.
So, but keep in mind, we, the taxpayers, the banks, and the whole circumstance bailed out everybody in Silicon Valley. The insurance companies in Mississippi, for instance, if you are a poor person, and most of the people in Roland Park were
1/3 were below the poverty level.
exactly. So the insurance companies, you still got your deductible. The United States is horrible in terms of deductibles. If you go to France and Germany, you have insurance, you pay on it for 30 years, you have a claim, they pay the claim. That's a sense of fairness.
No deductible?
No deductible. Of course not. Why? You've been paying this insurance company, whatever, for 30 years, your house gets blown away, you've got to come up with, what, 2% of the policy?
Lane, I need to get my passport ready.
Probably a lot of people are doing that. But we have to keep in mind that this is so difficult issue and recognize how we're going to start. I mean, it should have started in Mississippi. The local chapter, I think the NAACP was there. He had his T-shirt on. They had to take the president in a room and sit down and said, wait a minute, here's the challenges. We want a follow-up report. And these people are in poverty. For instance, the rule on the health insurance, the Medicaid, under the pandemic, every state, every poor person was covered. Well, the federal government just changed that.
It. Yeah.
Well, it's a horrible thing to have happen. And I think we still have the pandemic, and I wish President Biden would just say, no, we're going to keep it. Because Mississippi and Texas and others, they're not going to cover the poor people, the Medicaid.
Well, that's where the poor people in these Republican-controlled states have to stop voting against their own interests. It's up to them to elect people who are going to. It's up to them to elect people who are going to be responsive to their needs. And so it's the Republican-controlled states that are rejecting Obamacare, who don't want to fund these programs. And so again, the onus is on the people who send these conservative people to office. It was the craziest thing I've ever heard was that the border going blue and reelecting some of the most outrageous, outlandish conservative Republicans, sending them back to office, and the fact that it's still turning blue along the border. That is, still turning red. I'm sorry, still turning red. That is just that's insane to me. How people will vote against their own interests.
Okay, we're going to take a break here. We'll pick up at that point when we come back. Okay, we're going to take a break here at Contemporary Black Voices with our very special guest, Mr. Lane Denton, will be right back with you.